Power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it walks in quiet, holding memories heavier than gold. What would you do if the person you dismiss turned out to control your entire future? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that honor our veterans. His name was William Harlan, but everyone who knew him called him Bill. He stood in line like any other customer, khakis pressed but old, jacket clean but plain, the kind of clothes that didn't scream money but whispered dignity. His boots, though, were unmistakable. Worn but polished, military issue, the kind that told stories in their creases. He was 72, back straight, shoulders square, and carried a calm stillness that seemed out of place in a world that rushed past people like him. To anyone watching, he was just another old man. Bill didn't mind. He never had. Being underestimated had become one of life's unexpected blessings. The bank branch was bright with that hollow, commercial kind of cheer. Plans that weren't real, a coffee station with a machine that hadn't worked in weeks, framed posters of smiling families getting loans they couldn't afford. It was the kind of place where appearance mattered more than substance, just like the man pacing behind the glass-walled office with the words Branch Manager, Chad Whitaker stenciled in clean black vinyl. Chet noticed Bill immediately, and not in a good way. He was on the phone, but his eyes kept flicking to the line forming at the front of the lobby. One customer, two, then the old man. Chad sighed, his lips pressing into that tight, dismissive frown that seemed etched into his face. His tie was thin, fashionable, too short for his torso. His shoes were shiny, but not from use. Just new. He walked with a kind of swagger that had never earned a stripe or medal, only compliments from middle management for ambition and presentation. Chad hung up and stepped out of his office, nodding at a woman in yoga pants, ignoring the single mother with a stroller, and frowning when his eyes met Bill's. He leaned over to the teller, Tina, and muttered something with a forced chuckle. She didn't laugh. Tina Morales was new, young, sharp, and with a veteran grandfather whose stories still echoed in her mind every Sunday night at the dinner table. She glanced at Bill and gave a small, respectful nod. He returned it with the hint of a smile. When it was finally Bill's turn, he stepped forward, pulled out his ID, and handed over a faded checkbook. "Good morning, miss. I just need to check on a transfer." Before Tina could respond, Chad stepped in, voice oozing artificial authority. "Sir, we'll need to verify your ID. This is a secure financial institution, not the VA." Bill looked at him evenly. "That's fine. Run it." Chad barely glanced at the ID, already making a face. "You're going to have to do better than this. This license is expired." "It's not expired. That's a veteran's designation, issued last year." Chad smirked. "Still looks pretty sketchy. This from one of those online print-your-own kits?" Tina opened her mouth to interject, but Chad raised a hand to stop her. Bill said nothing for a moment, then, "I've got more documentation if you want to call corporate." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Chad said, loud enough for the people in the lobby to glance over. "But we don't have time for whatever this is. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, sir. You're holding up the line." There was no line, just silence. Bill slowly gathered his ID and checkbook, placing them back in the same leather case he'd had since Kuwait. He looked at Tina. "Thank you, anyway." She looked heartbroken. "Sir, But Bill just nodded and turned, walking toward the glass doors. A father holding a toddler stepped aside to let him pass. Another customer muttered under their breath, shaking their head at Chad's behavior. Chad straightened his shirt cuffs and turned to Tina. "Next time, screen people before they get to the desk." She stared at him. "You didn't even look at his name." "Didn't have to." He returned to his glass-walled kingdom, blinds slightly open, always ready to project authority, but never ready to earn it. Outside, Bill paused just before stepping off the curb. The sun caught his silver hair. He looked back once, not in anger, not even in disappointment. Just a glance, the kind that didn't need words. He pulled out a phone. Not a smartphone, not some sleek, shiny slab of glass. An old flip phone. He clicked a button and waited. 3 rings. "Curran, it's me," he said quietly. "Yeah, I think it's time. Let's set up the call with Heritage Valley Holdings. I want to make an acquisition." Inside the bank, Chad leaned back in his chair, feet crossed on the desk, scrolling through vacation rentals on his phone. He had no idea that within the hour his career, his office, and the very building he stood in would all be in someone else's hands. And that someone was the man he had just kicked out. The call had lasted under 5 minutes. By the time Bill Harlan ended the conversation, a quiet flurry of activity had begun behind the scenes. Emails routed to legal, compliance, and acquisitions teams across 3 time zones. A discrete calendar block on a private server flagged an emergency internal meeting titled simply HV Branch 67, Immediate Review. Bill had returned to his truck, an old but pristine Ford F-150 with a dented fender and a small bronze star decal on the bumper, and sat behind the wheel, thinking. He didn't need revenge. He'd lived long enough to know what that word could cost. What he needed was something far more difficult: transformation. Not just for a building or a man like Chad, but for every place that had quietly decided who was worth serving and who wasn't. He wasn't angry. He was awake, and sometimes that was far more dangerous. From Stodham Zigford across town, inside a modern glass tower labeled Harlan Equity Group, the atmosphere was calm but focused. Karen Lively, Bill's most trusted partner and former Army logistics commander, moved with quiet urgency. Her heels clicked against the polished floors as she passed department heads, giving only nods and the occasional sharp instruction. She entered the boardroom, where 2 monitors were already flickering to life. "Connect me to procurement, M&A, and legal," she said, placing her tablet on the table. Bill just made the call. A few moments later, 3 video feeds joined the room. Robert Kravitz from legal, a stoic Harvard law veteran in suspenders. Myra Danes from acquisitions, already thumbing through PDFs of financials. And Quinn Bowers from compliance, sipping coffee like it was war fuel. Heron didn't waste time. "We're greenlit to begin proceedings for Heritage Valley Bank. Target, full acquisition of regional branch chain. We start with branch 67. Myra raised an eyebrow. "That the one in Centerville?" Karen gave a sharp nod. "Something happened?" Kravis asked, eyes narrowing. Heron tapped her screen, pulling up internal memos. "Let's just say Branch 67 just told the owner of the holding company he wasn't welcome." Quinn let out a low whistle. "Seriously? Someone turned away Bill?" "Didn't just turn him away. Mocked his ID, profiled him, and made a public scene of it." Kravitz leaned forward. "Okay, we'll need full operational metrics, liabilities, HR files on site management." Myra was already scrolling. "Branch manager's name is Chad Whitaker. No notable infractions on record, but I'm pulling employee exit interviews. 3 of them mention toxic management and discriminatory behavior in vague terms." Karen folded her arms. "Bill wants it clean. Quiet. No headlines until the ink's dry." They all understood what that meant. This wasn't about showboating or revenge. This was going to be a lesson in humility, precision, and impact, the kind Bill Harlan specialized in. Meanwhile, back in Centerville, Chad Whitaker returned to his desk with a self-satisfied smirk. He had just emailed Regional HQ a customer disruption report, referring to Bill as an unverified individual, attempting to access sensitive account information. He clicked send with a dramatic flourish, then leaned back in his chair, sipping from his imported mineral water like he was sipping from a victory cup. Tina Morales stood behind the counter, her jaw clenched. She hadn't said anything after Chad's public humiliation of the older man. She'd seen his name flash across the checkbook, William T. Harlan. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. Her dad had mentioned it once, something about Harlan Equity being veteran-founded, deeply philanthropic, practically legendary in finance circles. She turned back to her screen and opened a discreet tab. A quick search confirmed her suspicion. The images of a younger Bill standing beside servicemen, cutting ribbons at community centers, sitting humbly in jeans and work boots next to rows of new small business owners. Founder, William Harlan Colonel, was right there on the first page. Tina's hand shook slightly as she reached for the bank phone. But she didn't dial it. She called her dad. "Dad," she whispered, glancing over at Chad's closed door. "You remember telling me about that guy, Bill Harlan? The Army vet who started that investment group?" "Of course I do. That man could have bought a private island. Instead, he built homes for disabled vets. Why?" "I think he just walked into my branch, and Chad kicked them out." A pause. Then, "Oh, hell." That afternoon, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the Heritage Valley Bank's Centerville branch. They weren't flashy, no logos, but the energy they brought made everyone inside sit up a little straighter. Erin was the first to step out. She wore a navy pantsuit, tablet in hand, face unreadable. Beside her was Derek Colton, regional VP, whose assistant had only told him, "You need to be there in person now." Tina saw them through the glass and instinctively stood, smoothing her blouse. Chad, oblivious, was still editing his vacation itinerary for Cancun. When the doors opened, the air shifted. Karen walked straight to Tina, smiling warmly. "You must be Miss Morales." "Yes, ma'am. I read your personnel file this morning. Very impressive. Could you please gather the staff in the lobby? We'd like to have a quick meeting." Tina blinked. "Yes, of course." Chad finally noticed the movement and emerged from his office with that smug tilt to his chin. "Can I help you folks?" he asked, flashing his business card. Karen took it, glanced, and handed it to Derek without looking up. Derek stepped forward. "Chad Whitaker, I'm Derek Colton, your regional VP." Chad froze for a beat, smile faltering. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming by. We didn't schedule it." Karen turned toward the gathered employees, her voice calm and firm. "My name is Karen Lively. I represent the executive office of Harlan Equity Group, majority stakeholder in Heritage Valley Holdings. Effective immediately, we are initiating a leadership audit of this branch." Chad paled. "Wait, excuse me. A what?" Derek looked at him, deadpan. "An audit, the kind that follows a report of potential misconduct, especially when it concerns how we treat customers who are veterans." Murmurs rippled across the room. Karen continued. "This morning, a decorated U.S. Army veteran walked into this branch. He was disrespected, dismissed, and asked to leave, despite carrying proper identification and holding a high-value account." Chad opened his mouth to interrupt, but Derek cut him off. "We reviewed the security footage. We've listened to audio. We know exactly what was said." Karen turned to Chad directly now. "Do you know who William Harlan is, Mr. Whitaker?" Chad looked blank. "Of course you don't," she said softly. "Because you weren't listening. You were judging." She reached into her bag and handed him an envelope. Chad opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single-page letter. "Termination of employment, effective immediately." "No hearing, no review," he stammered. Derek's voice was low and cold. "No second chance. You showed us your values in full clarity. We believe you." 2 plainclothes security officers stepped forward, not aggressively, but firmly. One took Chad's badge, the other gestured toward the door. As Chad was led out, stunned silence filled the lobby. Karen turned back to the employees. "Today's about more than policy, it's about culture, integrity, and remembering that the people we serve, especially those who have served this country, deserve better than what they got this morning." She paused, looking each of them in the eyes. "Mr. Harlan will be here tomorrow, not as a CEO, not as your new owner, but as a man who still believes that the best change starts from within. I suggest you be ready." And with that, she nodded to Tina. "Ms. Morales, would you like to sit in on the new branch orientation team?" Tina blinked. "Me? You were the only one who treated him with respect." Tina nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I'd be honored." Outside, the last SUV pulled away as the sun began to sink low. Bill Harlan, sitting once again in his truck just down the block, watched it all unfold through the rear-view mirror. He'd smile. He didn't gloat. He simply whispered to himself, "That's one." And then he drove off to prepare for tomorrow. The parking lot was half full when Bill arrived the next morning, early enough that the dew hadn't yet burned off the windshields. He stepped out of his truck, dressed just the same. No expensive suit, no bodyguards, no fanfare. His jacket was a little darker than yesterday's, but his boots were the same pair. A quiet statement. He hadn't changed. Not because of yesterday. Not because of what he owned, but because who he was had never needed embellishment. He paused before entering the bank, looking up at the signage, Heritage Valley Bank, a name that now belonged to Harlan Equity, at least in the legal sense. But names and ownership didn't change culture. That was what he'd come back for. Inside, the energy had shifted. There was no buzz of gossip like the day before, no tension vibrating beneath polite smiles, just silence, focused, respectful, cautious, the kind of silence people use when they're unsure how to act around someone they now realize they judged too quickly. Piero Maras was the first to look up from behind the counter. Her eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in that sincere way someone does when they see someone they respect, even admire. "Mr. Harlan?" she said, standing. "Bill," he corrected gently. "If you're going to keep calling me Mr., I'll think I'm back at basic." A few soft chuckles rose from the cubicles and teller counters nearby. He stepped toward her, placing a small white paper bag on the counter. "Brought coffee and donuts? Old habit. Can't have a decent conversation without caffeine and sugar. Or so I was told by a Marine major who outranked me by exactly 10 minutes. Tina laughed, surprised by how at ease he made her feel. "Thank you, Bill." Bill turned to face the rest of the staff, now gathering slowly in the open space beyond the customer area. Some looked unsure, some were clearly nervous. A few had that expression of regret, the kind that only forms after you've watched the truth slap your assumptions into dust. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I don't believe in surprise inspections. That's not how people learn. Yesterday wasn't a test. It was just another day. But it told me everything I needed to know." He paused, scanning the room. "People talk about culture like it's a mission statement on a wall. It's not. It's how you treat the janitor when no one's looking, how you greet someone who doesn't look like they belong, how you handle a stranger who doesn't meet your idea of what important looks like." A few staff members lowered their eyes. Bill continued, voice steady. "I came here looking to check on my account. I walked out owning the building. That's not something to cheer about. It's something to reflect on." The bank's assistant manager, a tall woman in her 40s named Janet, stepped forward. "Mr. Harlan?" "Bill?" "I want to apologize. I wasn't on the floor when you were here, but that doesn't matter. I'm part of the leadership, and I didn't build a kind of environment where something like that couldn't happen." Bill nodded at her. "Thank you. That means something." Another employee, a middle-aged man in IT, raised his hand awkwardly. "What happens now?" "Now," Bill smiled. "Now we build it better. From the inside out. With people who get it." He looked around. "You all have a choice. You can stay, be part of something that puts service before pretense, or you can walk, no hard feelings. But we'll be rebuilding this branch with a new foundation, respect, honor, and accountability. We won't be chasing metrics over meaning, and yes, we'll still make money, but not at the expense of our soul." Aaron entered just then, flanked by a few of the regional onboarding leads. She nodded to Bill but didn't interrupt. This was his moment. Silence followed. Not tense, not awkward, just thoughtful. Then Tina stepped out from behind the counter. "I'd like to stay," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "I want to help build that kind of place. I think it matters." Janet followed. "Me too." One by one, others nodded. Some quickly, some slowly, but most of them stayed. The only one who didn't speak was Brett, a younger associate who had mirrored Chad's behavior a little too closely in past weeks. He quietly slipped into the back, packed up his things, and left. No one stopped him. No one needed to. Bill turned toward Karen, giving her a quiet nod. She stepped forward with folders. "Today we begin team onboarding. Not orientation, onboarding. New structure, new policies, new standards." She handed a folder to Tina first. "You're being promoted to lead teller. We'll talk details after lunch." Tina's eyes widened. "Seriously? You earned it before you knew who Bill was, that's the point." Janet received her own folder. She'd be taking over interim branch management under a probationary term. Bill wanted her there, but he wanted to see the change lived, not promised. As staff broke into small onboarding groups, Bill sat off to the side, sipping coffee from a paper cup and watching. He wasn't leading the meeting. He was watching the culture shift in real time. That was more valuable than any line in a shareholder report. Tina came over during a break and sat beside him. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "You could have just bought the bank and never looked at us again." Bill nodded. "I've done that before. But I've also watched too many good people rot in places that never respected them. Sometimes it's not enough to just buy a place. You have to inhabit it, shape it." She hesitated. "Can I ask, why'd you really come into this branch yesterday? I mean, there are dozens closer to your headquarters." Bill smiled faintly. "This was the first branch to deny a home loan to one of our Veteran Scholarship Program alumni. We traced the approval trail and found something off." And he blinked. "So, this was more than just a random visit. Let's just say I believe in seeing things for myself." Outside the windows, the street bustled as usual. Cars passed. Life moved. But inside the bank, something different was happening. Something rare. A transformation, not because of money or fear or optics, but because someone had finally drawn the line and said, "Enough." Not loud, not angry, just formally. "Enough." Bill stood, placing his cup in the trash. "I'll be back next week. Not to check on you. Just to say hello." Tina smiled. "We'll be ready." He stepped out into the sunlight. This time, no one asked him to leave. They watched him go, and somehow it felt like they'd all just arrived. The headlines didn't hit the public until 5 days later, but the whispers began that same afternoon. It started with a single Slack message, forwarded from an HR director at Heritage Valley's corporate office to a friend at another regional bank. Word is, Harlan Equity bought a branch outright, walked in and pulled rank. Someone on the ground got fired on the spot. From there, it spread like smoke through a dry field. In the world of finance, where egos were as sharp as suits and legacy brands often ruled without challenge, a sudden power move like this didn't just raise eyebrows. It sparked fear, especially when the man behind it wasn't some flamboyant billionaire or cutthroat hedge fund shark, but a 72-year-old Army veteran who wore jeans and didn't like press. It wasn't the takeover that worried people. It was the motive, because if Bill Harlan was willing to quietly buy an entire chain to teach a lesson about respect, who else was watching? Who else might decide to follow his lead? The corporate floors of banks in Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, and San Diego were suddenly buzzing not with earnings reports, but questions. Who was the branch manager? Why would he throw out a veteran? Did he really not recognize the owner? And beneath those questions, the real one no one wanted to say aloud, how many of our branches would pass the Harlan test? Bill wasn't on social media. He didn't sit for interviews, and he didn't offer press releases. But the silence made it worse. Because power that doesn't speak makes people fill in the blanks. Back in Centerville, the bank was humming with quiet confidence. Not perfection. Old habits still lingered in small corners, but a new rhythm had taken hold. Janet had removed 2 layers of bureaucratic paperwork that were clearly designed to intimidate low-income applicants. Tina had introduced a system for identifying veterans during account opening that offered them immediate fee waivers and personal consultation. Even the janitorial staff now had access to the break room Keurig, which had somehow been staff-only before. The walls hadn't changed, but the air had. In a modest office off the main hallway, Tina sat with a small stack of paper files, organizing a community outreach plan she had proposed earlier that week. She was coordinating a workshop for returning veterans on financial literacy, co-hosted by the local VFW. She was nervous, but it felt right. Her phone buzzed. A text from Karen. "Heading your way next week. Bill wants to loop you into something. Big picture. Be ready." Tina stared at the message for a few seconds, heart thumping. Was this about the other branches? She didn't have long to wonder. That same afternoon, Bill sat in a quiet conference room in St. Louis across from the CEO of the rival firm Kessler & Dane. The man across from him was polished, charming, and slightly anxious. He kept adjusting his cufflinks. "We heard you acquired part of Heritage Valley," he said, trying to sound casual. "Bit unusual, even for you." Bill gave a soft chuckle. "It's not about the acquisition, it's about what came with it." The CEO blinked. "And what was that?" "A culture problem." Silence stretched for a few seconds. "Bill," the man began, choosing his words carefully, "I admire what you're trying to do, but culture is, well, it's a beast. You fix it in one place, it breaks in another, and you can't watch every branch." "You don't need to," Bill replied. "I just need to make sure the people running them know that someone might be watching." The CEO leaned back slowly. "This wasn't about money." Bill shook his head. "Money's easy. Character's expensive." That line would be repeated in 6 boardrooms across 4 states within the week. Back in Centerville, word of Bill's quiet intervention had reached local papers, not through press releases, but through customer testimony. A small piece titled "Veteran Treated Poorly at Local Bank Turns Out to Be Owner" ran in the community section of the Centerville Gazette. The article mentioned no names, no staff details, just the story and the lesson. Local business owners began moving their accounts to the branch. Veterans walked in with cautious optimism, holding worn DD 2014 forms and military ID cards with the kind of reverence people usually reserve for passports. One even saluted Tina by mistake. She didn't correct him. She just smiled and thanked him for his service. That weekend, the branch hosted its first after-house community session, Financial Basics for Returning Vets. The break room had been converted into a makeshift seminar space with coffee, chairs, and a whiteboard. Bill didn't speak. He just sat in the back, listening. What he saw moved him more than he let on. A young Army reservist in a hoodie asked how credit scores worked. A retired Navy petty officer wanted help applying for a loan to start a small woodworking shop. A Gold Star mother just wanted to know how to move her son's savings into a foundation. Every question was answered. Every voice heard. After the session ended, one of the younger attendees approached Bill, not knowing who he was. "Thanks for putting this together, sir. Whoever did it, they get it." Bill nodded, clasping the young man's hand. "That's the point." A few hours later, Bill and Karen sat together on a quiet bench outside the bank, coffee in hand. "How many branches do you think we need to fix?" she asked, softly. Bill looked up at the stars. "I read every one that needs fixing." Karen sipped her drink. "That could be hundreds." He looked at her. "Good thing we've got time. And hell," he smiled. "Tina's a good one. You see leadership in her? Leadership isn't just about knowing what to do, it's about doing it even when no one's watching." She passed the hardest test. Character under pressure. Karen leaned back, arms crossed. We're going to need more like her. We will, Bill said. And in that moment, for the first time since he walked into that branch as just another old man, he allowed himself a smile, because he saw the future forming. And this time, it wasn't built on arrogance or power or fear. It was built on service, the kind he'd spent a lifetime believing in. The meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp, but by 8:45, the entire top floor of Heritage Valley Holdings headquarters was humming with nervous energy. Phones buzzed quietly on silent mode. Assistants moved quickly between offices with coffee and legal pads. Executives who had once strolled into boardrooms with the swagger of untouchable power now stood silently in clusters, whispering about the situation. No one had expected Bill Harlan to move so fast or so deliberately. The acquisition of the Centerville branch had been filed, finalized, and executed in under 72 hours. What had once been a regional footnote was now national news. Not because of the size of the deal, but because of what it said. A billionaire veteran had walked into a bank, been disrespected, and then, without press or theatrics, had quietly bought the institution that treated him like he didn't belong. And now he was coming to the top. At 8:57, the boardroom doors opened. Bill entered with his usual unassuming posture, shoulders straight, eyes sharp, his movements deliberate but never hurried. He wore a charcoal blazer, the same weathered boots, and a simple white Oxford shirt with no tie. Karen Lively followed 2 steps behind him, carrying a thin binder and a digital tablet. The executive stood, not because of protocol, but because the weight in the room had shifted. "Please," Bill said calmly, his voice low but carrying. "Sit down." I did. No one spoke, not even Brent McAllister, the CEO of Heritage Valley Holdings, a man known for interrupting senators and stonewalling financial journalists. Bill didn't touch the coffee that had been placed at his seat. He looked down at the folder in front of him for a moment, then back at the faces watching him. "I'm not here to give a speech," he began. "I'm not interested in theatrics or optics. I'm here because this company has a choice to make." He glanced toward the head of HR, then toward legal, then directly at Brent. "I walked into one of your branches last week. I wasn't greeted. I wasn't respected. I wasn't even listened to. And it wasn't because the staff was overwhelmed. It wasn't because there was a line or a crisis. It was because someone in your system, someone you promoted, decided I didn't look like I belonged." Silence. "And that tells me everything I need to know about the leadership culture of this company." Brent cleared his throat. "Mr. Harlan." Bill, Brent said, adjusting his cufflink. "What happened in Centerville was unacceptable. We've taken immediate action, and I assure you, the manager in question has been terminated." "I know," Bill replied. "I signed the paperwork." Several of the executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Karen handed out slim folders to each of them. "In those folders," Bill said, "you'll find documentation of similar incidents across 10 other branches, some recent, some from as far back as 5 years. In each case, complaints were dismissed. Employees who spoke up were written up or quietly pushed out. In one case, a veteran employee was denied an internal promotion 3 times despite being qualified, and when she filed a formal grievance, it disappeared." One of the board members opened her folder and paled. "These aren't isolated mistakes," Bill continued. "They are patterns, and patterns mean culture. A culture you've let fester." Brant leaned forward, trying to regain composure. "Bill, I won't defend every decision we've made, but as you know, in organizations of this scale, there are always outliers." "No," Bill cut in, his tone sharpening just enough to still the room. "Outliers are when someone breaks rank. What I'm seeing is rank protecting itself. That's not an outlier. That's systemic failure." He paused, letting that settle. I didn't buy into Heritage Valley to flip branches or extract profit. I bought in because people deserve better. Veterans, minorities, young tellers who do the right thing when no one's watching. The people who walk through your doors with hope and walk out feeling invisible. Brent tried again, more careful now. So, what exactly are you proposing? Bill reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded page. He unfolded it and laid it flat. Effective immediately, I'm initiating a restructuring of all frontline operations. Every branch manager will undergo new certification in veteran sensitivity, anti-discrimination ethics, and community-based leadership. A full audit of HR practices will be conducted across every regional division. Complaints that were previously dismissed will be reopened and reviewed by an independent committee. And Karen, he nodded toward her, will oversee the entire transition. The room reacted in slow motion. Some looked relieved. Others looked stunned. Brent, for the first time, seemed genuinely rattled. That's a massive undertaking. The board would need time to... The board's already voted, Karen said, placing a single-page memo in front of Brent. He stared at it, then flipped it over to read the signature block. 14 of the 17 board members had approved it. Bill stood. I'm not here to ruin this company. I'm here to rebuild it. And I won't do it with slogans or PR. I'll do it with people. Real people who've been ignored long enough. He moved toward the door, pausing just long enough to say, and if anyone here has a problem with that, your resignation will be accepted without delay. Then he left. Karen remained for a moment, collecting the untouched binders. We'll begin with Centerville's model. The leadership there gets it. You'll receive transition instructions by end of day. And with that, she followed him out. In the hallway, the two walked side by side in silence for a long moment. Finally, Karen asked, "Think they'll fall in line?" Bill didn't hesitate. Some will, some won't, but the ones who matter already have. That evening, Tina received an email. Wasn't from her manager. It wasn't even from Karen. It was from Bill himself. Subject line, "Let's build it together." The message was short. Tina, I saw your proposal for veteran outreach across the region. It's exactly the kind of thinking we need. When you're ready, I'd like to fly you out to meet with our transition team. You've earned your seat at the table. Bill, she read it twice, then once more. Then she cried. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because she'd finally been seen. And across the country, in cities and towns, big and small, others began to take notice. Not of Bill's wealth, not of his titles, but of his message. That dignity isn't something you earn with a position. It's something you give without condition. 3 months later, the Centerville branch didn't look much different on the outside. Same signage, same parking lot, same plate glass windows catching the morning sun. But on the inside, everything had changed. The old coffee machine in the corner now actually worked, and beside it stood a framed photo of Bill shaking hands with a local veteran named Hector, who'd opened his first small business account 2 weeks after the bank was restructured. The break room had a new bulletin board filled with community event flyers, workshops, job fairs, and financial planning sessions hosted by staff on their days off. The energy wasn't just different, it was alive. Bill sat at his usual place near the front window, sipping his black coffee, a little stronger than most would prefer. His boots were dusted with gravel from a visit earlier that morning to a nearby construction site where Harlan Equity was sponsoring affordable veteran housing. Tina sat across from him, tablet in hand, her blazer freshly pressed, a small veteran support pin clipped to her lapel. "Numbers are up again," she said. "Applications have doubled since last month. Not just veterans, first-time small business owners, single parents, immigrants. People who stopped trusting banks years ago are walking back through the doors." Bill nodded slowly. "It's 'cause someone opened the door the right way." She smiled. "Because you made us believe we could." "Oh," Bill said, setting down his cup. "You proved it before I ever walked in. I just gave you the keys." Behind them, a soft buzz of conversation filled the lobby. A young Marine in a wheelchair was being helped through a loan application by Janet. Two Army vets, one with salt and pepper hair, the other with a service dog resting at his feet, were sitting across from an advisor who spoke fluent Spanish, smiling as she walked them through investment plans. And at the door, a local high school student shadowing for career day watched it all with quiet awe. The branch had become more than a bank. It had become a space where respect lived in every interaction, where service didn't end with a transaction, and where the term customer had finally started to mean community. Karen entered without fanfare, holding a leather-bound folder and a satisfied look that only came from hard-won progress. "Morning, you two," she said, nodding at both. "Hope I'm not interrupting?" "Never," Tina said. Aaron pulled up a chair and opened the folder. "I just came from headquarters. Thought you might want to see this." She slid the contents across the table. Bill scanned the page. Annual Internal Culture Report. Executive Summary. Heritage Valley Holdings. Right to the top under Key Findings. Employee trust and veteran engagement at all-time high. The Centerville model has been adopted company-wide. Beneath it, a quote attributed to an anonymous regional manager read, "We used to measure performance by revenue. Now we measure it by the people we retain, the lives we improve, and the trust we earn." Karen grinned. "They're calling it the Harlan Doctrine." Bill groaned. "Lord help me." Tina laughed. "It's fitting." He shook his head. "It's unnecessary." "Maybe," Karen said. "But it's real. We've already had 5 other financial institutions reach out to model the same training, the same hiring practices. One even asked to license your walk-in audit protocol." "Let them," Bill said, "as long as it's about more than headlines." Karen looked at him seriously. "It is now." They sat for a moment, letting it settle. Then Tina asked the question she'd been holding in since the previous week. "So, what's next for you?" Bill looked out the window. "There's a credit union in Nebraska that just closed 3 rural branches. The locals are organizing a co-op to take it over. They reached out to see if we'd help." Karen raised her brows. "We?" Bill smiled at Tina. "Only if you're interested in becoming our Director of Community Development." Her mouth fell open slightly. "Wait, are you serious?" Karen nodded. "We've already drafted the offer. You'd oversee local partnerships and outreach initiatives nationwide. You'd train others to do what you did here." Tina blinked fast, her throat tightening. I don't even have a finance degree." Bill leaned in. "You have something better. You have values. The rest can be taught." Tina didn't answer right away. She just looked around, the customers, the staff, the quiet pride humming through the walls. Then she looked back at Bill. "Calling in," she said. He smiled, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. He slid it across the table. She opened it slowly. Inside was a military owl coin. On one side, the Harlan equity insignia. On the other, the phrase, "Respect is earned by how we treat those with none to give us." Tina ran her fingers over the metal. "It's what we used to call a challenge coin," Bill said. "You only give them to people who embody the mission." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I'll on it every day," she whispered. He nodded. "I know." Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the last few customers filed out, Bill stood at the edge of the sidewalk, watching traffic pass. The wind tugged gently at his jacket. Across the street, a father was helping his young daughter tie her shoes. Down the block, a food truck bearing the phrase "veteran-owned" served a line of hungry workers. Karen came up beside him. "You ever think you'd end up here?" she asked. "I thought I'd retire quietly. Maybe get a boat." "Feel cool." He chuckled. "Nope. I think I've got one more mission in me." She nodded. "Then, so do I." That night, A video quietly uploaded to Harlan Equity's website and YouTube channel. No press release, no sponsorship, just a story. It showed clips from inside the Centerville branch. Smiles, handshakes, new businesses launching, kids learning to open their first savings accounts. The final shot showed Bill standing outside the bank, his back to the camera. A voiceover, not his, but Tina's, ended with the words, "He didn't walk in looking for trouble. He walked in looking for service. What he gave us instead was a second chance to do things right. And that's a legacy worth building." The video went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. And in a world tired of speeches and empty slogans, a quiet old soldier had walked in, been told to leave, and instead left behind something greater than vengeance. He left behind change, but lasting, measurable, human change. And in every corner office, every teller's desk, and every heart that had once doubted whether one person could really make a difference, the answer now had a name. Bill Harlan. And the bank that had once told him he didn't belong, it now bore his legacy in every handshake, every loan, every life it touched. Correct.